Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of MotionSocials Chronicles. And today is my absolute pleasure to have William Harris with me, the CEO and founder of Elumynt, an e-commerce marketing agency. William, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Culture, and excited to chat with you.
Awesome. Do you want to give us a quick intro about you and the business?
Sure. High level, Elumynt is an e-commerce focused growth agency. We specialize in optimizing for EBITDA, profit. A lot of times, if you're looking at growing e-commerce businesses, you'll hear advertisers talking about growing top line or ROAS or things like that, and they're all fine metrics. But I think they miss the real importance of the bottom line. So that's really kind of where we focus in on. I've been doing this for, I want to say we started this now about a decade ago, so 2014. But prior to that, I was running growth for an e-commerce store, and prior to that, I was running growth for a SaaS business. And so I cut my teeth a lot in SaaS space, and then brought what I learned from SaaS into the e-commerce world. And I think that's been a really fun blend of the two.
Mhm. And like being almost 12 years in the industry, how do you see the transition of the industry throughout the years? Because we know like actually the market evolves every here and there, like every year, and 12 years is a long period to be a leader in the industry. So what do you think also was the key thing that kept you like thriving in such a saturated market as an e-commerce industry?
Yeah, so two good questions there. Let's start with the first one of what have I seen change? Um, when we started off down this path, when I started the agency, uh, it felt like D2C e-commerce was very much a toddler in the way that things were being done. There was, again, a lot of focus on ROAS, a lot of focus on, let's just say, like immediate performance and not understanding long-term performance. And so coming from the SaaS world, a lot of what we looked at was LTV to CAC ratios and things like that. And if I say something that you're like, hey, explain that, I don't know if my audience knows what that means, please interrupt me. And otherwise, I'll just assume that this is kind of like common vernacular. But
General, yeah.
um, one of the things we started looking at was how do we make sure that what we're doing is optimizing towards profitability? And we were able to use these techniques to help now 13 companies get acquired. One sold for 800 million, one IPO'd. In a lot of this, I'd say I've seen D2C level up, and it's really exciting to me. It's fun to see where the D2C world has come. I would say, in my opinion, it's good that we see a lot less of like the drop shipping, hack your way to 100,000 a day kind of thing. That was very prevalent for a while. There's nothing wrong with drop shipping, but the way that it was being portrayed, I think, in a lot of TikTok or social media, it was toxic for the environment. So I see people really starting to focus on building brands, understanding what brand means, not just like the look and feel, but like what the actual brand presence is. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've noticed. The good along with that means that I think that we're building up more sound businesses in the e-commerce space. The downside to that is it can be a little bit more challenging to be competitive in this environment. So I love what Harley Finkelstein says, president of Shopify, which is that it's never been easier or more cost effective to start a business. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, especially in
Absolutely.
Shopify and the e-commerce realm. The hard side of that is very quickly you'll start to realize that there are some very sophisticated players out there, and you're going to need to level up. On the good side, there's a lot of really good information out there on what you need to do. Your podcast, my podcast, the Up Arrow podcast, what Harley's sharing on Shopify. There's a lot of really great resources out there for people to learn what they need to learn.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. And now being almost 12 years in the market, and before that you were like a marketing manager and a lead growth strategist for a company that was acquired by GoDaddy, I believe. So I just want to know what made you come to that switch, coming from obviously a well-paying job into starting an agency. Was that something that you were doing simultaneously at the same time, or you made a switch like totally from scratch?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a glutton for punishment to a point. And one of the things that I was writing about, let's just even go all the way back to the beginning of that. I would write about what we were doing on Entrepreneur and Fast Company, write about the ways that we were approaching growth. There was a
Hmm.
website called Growth Hackers. There was a website called inbound.org, which was put on by HubSpot. And there were periods of time where I was number one on these sites, right? Like this was my thing, and I was sharing what we were doing and how we were going about growing, and it was a lot of fun. Um, and the idea of being the glutton for punishment here is I would work nonstop, because not necessarily because it was required of me, because I just want to learn and grow and be the best. I have this hustle that's about me that's really hard to, let's say, satiate. And so I wrote an article on Fast Company about how to work 100 hours a week and not die. I think they changed the title because they didn't like that title. It was like how to work 100 hours a week, and be okay or something like that. But the title that I submitted was how to work 100 hours a week and not
Not
die.
die.
And because it was true, it wasn't it wasn't hyperbole, it wasn't an exaggeration. I was logging over 100 hours a week. That's not sustainable. But it's one of those things where you go through periods of life where that is the thing that you're going to dig into, and I think there's nothing wrong with going all after something. But what I realized was that okay, I'm working 100 hours a week, and while that's great, the pay doesn't change to a point, and you have to start recognizing this and say you're not building up equity or anything along those lines. And so for me, it was one of those things where if I am the type of person who wants to spend 80 hours, 100 hours a week digging into something to be the best, maybe I should look at going out on my own. And this was kind of just in my ear. My wife had whispered this as well of like, hey, you know what? Why don't you go out and do your own thing? Um, and then people started reaching out to me from the articles that I was writing on Fast Company, the articles I was reading, writing on Entrepreneur and stuff, basically saying, hey, I love your approach to growth. Could you help me grow my business as well? So I initially just started sharing all that information for free, just sharing what I was learning and doing. And then it's turned into like this idea where I said, sure, I like helping people. I know how to bring in a couple of other really great experts at these different marketing tactics. Yeah, why not? And so it was just me as like a consultant bringing in some other contractors to execute on stuff and helping to grow businesses. And it's purely accidental to start the business, to start the agency. Had never worked at an agency, and didn't know that the agency world was broken at the time in my mind, because I had never worked there. But very quickly after I started going into this, I started hearing people saying things like, oh, this is great. Our previous agency didn't understand our business. And I thought at first in my naivety that they were like, oh, they didn't understand the niche that we were in. And I think that's part of the truth. But what I really started to realize was what they meant was they didn't understand business. And so I'm getting into the P&Ls on companies. I'm really digging into things and saying, do I understand if what we're doing is driving them towards the goal that they actually want? Not just this top line, not just this ROAS, but like, what does it actually want, right? Like starting from that goal. And so that's one of those things that we started off with this company was how do we make sure that the people that are in our team are looking at P&Ls and really understanding the business and what is the business's goal outside of just revenue growth.
Yeah, so it seems like your beginning was not your typical one where you actually the whole agency is hassle for the first client. You actually got inbound leads starting straight from the beginning. So what took you like from that into scaling the agency? Was you just providing more value and getting more inbound leads, or were you just focusing your efforts in outbound and getting more clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're going to get a different answer from every other agency owner on that, right?
Yeah,
But I would
yeah,
say
yeah.
in our case, one of the things that I would say there's kind of like three pillars that I would say for successful growth in an agency world. Um, in our space, we bill based on a percent of ad spend, and so one of the nice things about this is that I don't have to necessarily acquire new customers in order for my business to grow.
Yeah.
If I take a customer who's spending $10,000, $100,000 a month, and I scale them to up to $1 million a month or whatever this might be, their payment to us also grows in relationship to that, which I think makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the beautiful things about this is if I kept the same amount of customers, but I grew my customers by a significant amount, then our business also grows. So step one in my mind was always do absolutely amazing work that benefits the customer. Again, going back to whether or not did this actually help them? Do they get to when they receive our invoice? The thing that I always wanted them to say was, that they're almost cheating us out of it. Like I want them to feel that it's like, I can't believe we just slipped another one by this guy and we're only paying him this much kind of thing, because
Definitely.
they're looking at this on the P&L saying, yeah, it might be $20,000 a month that they're paying us to manage their ads, but we're making them an additional $200,000 in EBITDA per month. And we're being able to show that. So they're saying, well, this is a no-brainer. So that's step one. Step one is do absolutely amazing work that benefits their business. Step two was don't lose them. And that kind of goes along with do absolutely amazing work, but it's more than just that. And one of the things that I realized early on was there are going to be times when you cannot do sensational work, or let's say that you are doing great work, but market conditions make that difficult for you to actually grow the business. And there are things outside of your control. And when that happens, it's going to fall back on, let's just say, the customer service aspect of this. So it was provide absolutely amazing customer service, because let's say that you didn't grow a business, but you delivered exactly what you said you were going to do on time. You were pleasant to work with. If they didn't understand things, you communicated it. Then they go, yeah, we didn't grow, but I know that if it was possible, we would have, because I can tell the process and the way that in which you went about this, and you handled things so well. And so that was the second thing, was just don't lose customers. And growth is a big part of that, but there's also times when that's not possible. And then the third thing is, again, if you're doing this, then you're going to get more referrals. And so the third part was really referrals. And so that's our biggest focus, and our biggest area of growth has been referrals. And that would be referrals from current customers, as well as referrals from partners. And again, the partners in it, ideally a good partner is in it, not to get a referral kickback, although those are always nice. They really want to make sure that they look good to their own clients. And so if this is, a web development agency that just sent us a client to run marketing, what they're saying is their client is struggling. They don't want their client to struggle. They want to be a hero by sending them the right person who's going to do great work for them. That makes them look good. And so if you do that, they want to send you more leads. And so that makes it very easy as well. The other part of this, then, outside of that 3-pillar system, is going to be inbound, exactly like you said, sharing what we're doing out in the world, making sure that people are aware of that. People can't work with you if they don't know who you are. They don't know that you exist. And I think the other benefit to sharing what we're doing, this is going to be on the blog or on the podcast or whatever format we're doing here, is you're going to attract customers that are like-minded. So you're attracting customers who are reading about how you're going about growth, and they say, I like that approach. I want to do that, versus customers who come to you and say, I completely disagree with your approach to using EBITDA or MER or these other metrics. This is the dumbest way to grow a business. Good. Don't work with us. That's fine. There are other businesses out there that will do it a different way,
Want
but
to
at
work with
least
us?
now they're aligned with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps you build an authority in the industry, which absolutely helps a lot. Now, I want to get
Yeah.
back to the second point where the mention, do not lose them, the clients. Do you think in this part, maybe the communication is the key aspect of it, besides great results, obviously? Because I feel like sometimes, even if you do not deliver great results or expected results, if you communicate them good enough to the client, you can still keep them.
Yes. Communication is huge. I would say communication and accountability. But I'm going to break this down into a little bit, because communication can mean so many different things. So when I say communication, there are going to be a couple pieces that I'm talking about. One is explain your rationale to the client. So a lot of times, let's just say you send over a metric, the ROAS, the MER, whatever that number is. Um, is it good? Is it bad? Why? Why do you think that it's good? I would tell people, hey, we're going to lower your ROAS and increase your profit. Are you okay with that? Well, if you hear a lot of people that are thinking, lower my ROAS, that sounds very, very bad. No, I don't want that. But if you explain to them, well, wait a minute, a lot of the campaigns that you're running have a high ROAS, but that's just a reported return on ad spend. That's not the actual return.
The
You're
actual one.
getting that because of, brand search or whatever this might be. I'm going to lower what you're going to see in platform, but it's going to have a bigger impact and push those campaigns towards things that are more incremental to your business. Now they say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. So I would say, like, it's very much about communication. And then the other piece of communication that I would say is going to be uh, thoughtfulness about this. So preemptively communicating. if you know that this is already going to be a thing that's on their mind, don't wait until they ask you about it. Preemptively send something over to them ahead of time. I think that if you can show them that you're thinking about their business the way that they're thinking about their business before they even have to tell you, I'm worried about XYZ, it it really helps them feel as if you're on their team and you're not just there,
Actually understanding them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and up to now, I'm just curious to know if you can share, not basically the name of the client or anything, but what has been the biggest amount of money that you have made a single client in a single month?
Yeah, the biggest amount in a single month. It's gonna be tough for me to say because I don't. It's not a metric that we track, if that makes sense. Not
Mm-hmm.
typically. I can remember celebrating at least a couple of clients hitting their first $10 million month. That's a really fun celebration. There's
Quite
also been
impressive.
clients that I can remember celebrating their first $1 million day, things like that. Those are really exciting. Our biggest client right now does about a billion total, but that includes online, retail, things like that, right? So that's we're not driving that full billion. Trying to think about how much we generate for them in a single month, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head, to be completely honest. But uh, I know that the ones that I get the most excited about and where we would consider our sweet spot is taking clients from 10 million to 100 million. And so when you're going on that path, a lot of the celebrations that we're celebrating are people hitting their first $10 million month.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. Also, just alone the 10 million mark is quite impressive, let alone the $100 million and going on. But I just want to know, like, in terms of you generating a client, let's say $10 million a month, I want to know how much work goes into one client, how much effort, how many like employees of your team get efforts put in, and like in general, how hard is that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, it's systems. And so one of the nice things about anything from a business standpoint, and I can remember one of my mentors, Dave Mortensen, founder of Anytime Fitness, told me along the lines of when you build the right systems, um, all of these problems, all of these things, these situations that you're doing, they're no different from what you were doing before. You're just adding on a zero or two or three, right? And so I would say the sheer amount of work might not be radically different in getting somebody to 1 million versus getting to 10 million versus getting to 100 million. And in fact, I would even say potentially it can be harder in the sheer amount of work to get somebody over those earlier hurdles because you don't have the systems in place. Once you have
Yeah.
the systems in place, then it's about iterating to find what helps them take that up 3% more, 5% more, whatever that might be. And so I would say, but to answer your question a little bit more fully, the typical team that we have on a client that is scaling from 10 million to 100 million is going to be, we have a growth strategist, and that's the person who's looking at their full, their P&L, what we're spending on Google, what we're spending on Meta, what we're spending on TikTok, what we're spending on programmatic, looking at all of that, looking at even things that we don't necessarily do but are impacting growth as well. So they're looking at email, looking at CRO, just looking at, as a growth strategist, what's working, what's not working, and where do we need to be able to lean into. Then they have their project manager. And for obvious reasons, there's a lot of moving pieces. And so this is still an essential piece of this, which is the person who just knows what's the marketing calendar. Do we have all of the assets that we need to be able to do this? Are we on time with this to be able to ship these things? And so that's a big piece of that. And then they're going to have a specialist on the paid search side, a specialist on the paid social side. Um, that's going to be their lead within those platforms. But there are still going to be other people that are executing, significant numbers of things outside of all of that. So we have a lot of automated alerting systems that we use to make sure that we know if something's going on. But we still have a manual alert system that we use as well as a fail-safe, because there are times when those alerts don't work. So we literally have a person who their job is to go through every one of our accounts every single morning and say, are there any, let's just say, undiagnosable things that typically, like, maybe alerts should flag, but they didn't flag, or something along those lines, which is like the feed got disconnected. There's not usually a really good alert system for the feed getting disconnected, and it might not show up in the data for a few days. And so we have this where it's like a checkbox of like, these are the things that we want you looking at every single day. And so I'd say the core team is going to be those main 4 people that I talked about. But outside of those 4 people, there's a lot of other people in the back end doing other things as well.
So we just say like approximately there would be like 5 employees working on a client?
Yeah, that's pretty typical because I would say, but it's, you're getting fractions of those employees. You're
Yeah.
going to have somebody, especially if they're working with us on the creative side as well. You've got somebody on creative as well, somebody working on coming up with ad copy. The person who's coming up with ad copy is still very often not the same person who's coming up with the actual imagery, right? Like these are different people as well. So I would say, yeah, average is going to be 5 to 10 people per account that size.
But I feel like that's quite impressive because taking a client from 10 million to 100 million and 10xing a client with so few people, I think that comes to two things, as in very, very great systems and very great team members. So I want to get to the
Yes.
first one, as you mentioned, the great systems. Now, I want to know what took you to get from, let's say, bad systems or system that was not working to come to this point and have great systems and processes. And we'll just say the number one thing would be experience that you get along the way.
Yeah. So this is where I don't know if you're familiar with EOS
Yeah,
traction,
yeah,
but in that circle there, in that framework, I am the visionary. I am not the process person. I'd say the thing that really helped us develop processes before I brought on my integrator implementer. I'm drawing a blank on the name of that one right now. Jeff Snyder is my guy, right? So
yeah.
he's our president and COO, if you would. Um, Before I brought him on, I'm like the typical guy who's like, we're gonna do this absolutely amazing thing, growth hacky style, right? Where it's like we're gonna do this, and it's gonna work or it's not gonna work, but this is the test that we're gonna run, and we're gonna do it, and we're gonna. So very much along those lines. Jeff, though, is very good at being able to say, okay, let's put this into a process that's repeatable, not just for you and your wacky brain to do, Will, but for anybody who comes into our team, whether they've had the experience that you've had or not, for them to be able to execute as if it was like you executing something like this, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so he was very good at being able to add those types of things. And so I'd say step one for me was my business making sure that we implemented EOS traction as a business. So we had a framework for how we do business. We have a framework for putting together these different operating procedures and then having a person in the business who's good at being able to help make sure that we do that, put together those procedures. So step one was that, and actually having our own process for doing that. Um, Step two, then I would say, is going to be making sure that you think through these different challenges and isolate where there's opportunity for them to be processes. We stray a little bit from EOS on some of these things because EOS is really talking about like, get the 80% done on the ones that are the biggest and most important ones. But we like to get really granular in a lot of these things where it's like, what is our process for optimizing, let's say, Google Ads at the SKU level? Uh, Part of the reason for that is because then that allows us to have a framework that we know we can execute similarly across any client that comes in without having to reinvent the wheel, or maybe the person we just put on this account hasn't done that yet, or whatever that might be, right? So now we have a similar procedure for everything, but then we also know where it goes wrong. So if for some reason that doesn't work for that client, we know that it wasn't because it wasn't implemented correctly. We know that it was implemented the way that it needed to be. So maybe we need to revisit this procedure. And so I'd say the other piece is just identifying where those things are and making sure that you're maintaining them.
Now, having systems in one place, like basically you need great people to go through the process and actually go ahead and implement this for the client. Now, I want to get to the people aspect of it, so the employees. I want to know
Mm-hmm.
how hard and how difficult is it for you to attract and retain A plus team members. And I want to get to know about your like hiring philosophy. What is it that you're looking for?
Yeah. The awards that we've won that I'm the most excited about as an agency owner are the best workplaces award that we got from Inc. And the reason why is because it's so much more selective. I think the Inc. 5000, right? It's like, yeah, you've got a lot of 5,000 people. I think the Inc. Best Workplaces, it ended up being like 500 or less businesses that win that. It's a lot more selective, and let's just say it's not entirely objective. Like there's based on tests and things and questions that they ask your team members about how happy they are and stuff like that. But it's not as objective as just simply like, hey, here's the revenue you made, here's the revenue you made. Like it's just
No.
a math formula whether you're in this list or not. And so I like that. The way that I would say going about attracting the right people um, is making sure that you have the right vision for where you want to go. If you don't know where you want the business to go, it's going to be very hard for you to get somebody who's truly an A player to want to join, because they're going to have a vision for where they want their life to go. And if they can't see themselves in the vision that you've painted, they don't want any part of that. And so I'd say that was a big piece of this. Again, implementing EOS being a big part of that and having that vision mapped and outlined. The other piece then, as far as retaining those people, um, the way that I like to look at this is, what do people want outside of work? Just in life, what do they want? And I think that a lot of what they want is going to be autonomy. They want the ability to have some control over their destiny. And that might mean control over their finances, control over their time, control over, the types of things that they're working on. And so I try to look at, how do we make sure we implement as much of that as possible. And when I say I mean our whole team. Like I'm not the one who came up with a lot of this. This is a lot coming from Jeff. This is coming from Grace Peach. This is coming from the people on my team, my leadership team, who have helped me to see things that I didn't necessarily see before. And the way that we've at least tried to approach this is, I want people to have control over their money. So we have an unlimited cap, or an unlimited bonus potential for anybody. There isn't a cap where it's like you're only allowed to make so much. They make a percent off of basically the amount of revenue that they manage for our company. And I think that's a really good thing to say, that it's like, look, if you figure out how to be more efficient so you can manage this much instead of only this much, you get that much more of a bonus. Like it's significantly, there's a way for you to impact your own income. I think that's huge. On the timing wise, we do have unlimited time off, and it can get a bad rap. And I think that's because it's done poorly by a lot of people. But the way that we've set it up, I think, encourages people to be able to actually use it. We do manually encourage people to use it. And it's like, I need you to use some time off. If you train a culture of people who make sure that their teammates are also using it too. So it's not just the same person who's taking their 4th week and the other people on their team haven't taken it at all. It's like, wait a minute, that's an error in how we're doing this. You should be thinking about your other teammate and saying, hey, I've taken 3 weeks off. You haven't taken any time off. Like, how can I help you take time off? Right. So it's like creating that. But we had one of the girls on our team who had always dreamed of being able to go to the World Cup in Australia. And so she was able to take 5 weeks off to go to the World Cup. Like, I think that if you have this set up to where we as a team say, how do we make sure that we are able to cover each other, that we have this, system set up so that way people can do it, then it allows for people to have that flexibility. That's on the big side. On the small side, even just the flexibility of being able to say, I've got a, appointment for my dog today that I got to dip out from 2 to whatever. And like, there's not like this complicated process or whatever to go through. You just simply say like, hey, I'll be back on as soon as I'm done with this. Things are covered. They're handled. I think a lot of that autonomy is a big piece of helping to retain those people. The other side of that, though, is maintaining that right vision. And so, again, you can have all of that in place, but if you don't have the vision, if you're not growing, if you don't have the right projects for them to work on, they're going to get bored. And so making sure you're saying, how do we make sure that we are at the forefront of what the industry is doing, and that we are challenging ourselves, that I'm challenging myself, that I'm challenging my team, and that we're going to continue to make sure that we're doing things that are exciting and beneficial.
That's great. That's great. And in terms of like building a culture, I feel like the award that you want speak for itself. But I want to get to know on your perspective on building a culture, in terms of what do you think would be the most underrated and the overrated aspects of building a great team culture.
Hmm. I don't know if it's underrated or overrated, but I would just say that the key that I've seen now, and I've heard it reiterated, and so it might seem like I'm just rehashing this, but I'm saying that I'm rehashing things I've heard and seen, and that I've experienced now firsthand as well. And so I'm saying this is why it makes sense. One is hiring has to be one of the most important things that you do in that interview process. We do go through the normal GWC stuff that EOS would talk about, gets it, wants it, capacity. But beyond that, really hiring for that culture. I There are questions that I ask in the interview process where I'm trying to understand them as a person as well. For instance, it's like, what's a personal goal that you have in the next 5 years? Not work related. What do you want to do in your own personal life? I want to get to know you as a human being, And I think if you say like, I have absolutely no goals for my personal life, that's a red flag to me that you're probably just not an intrinsically motivated person, and I don't want to have to ride you, right? So there are things that I'm trying to identify in that. The other piece I think to that is going to be firing people quickly who are not a good fit. And I've heard that said before. It is so painful. It is literally probably the most gut wrenching thing that I've ever had to do the first time we had to. But in every single situation that I can think of with this, that person who we had to let go went on to do even better things because we also weren't the right fit for them. And I think that's the
Yeah.
thing that you have to
The
remember is that it's
mutual.
like you're holding that person back the longer you keep them in a position that is not right for them. And so it's better for them. It's better for our team. You can instantly see the team morale boost when you get the right person into that spot. And so I'd say like those two things, like the phrase that I've heard is slow to hire, quick to fire. And I would say that's the paramount to making sure that you have a good team culture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now speaking of firing or bad hirings, so how often has that happened to you to maybe have a bad hire, and how does that usually affect your agency and the team culture around you?
Mm. So we're still small in terms of the overall size of people. I think we're at 15 people right now, not counting
Hmm.
contractors, right? Just W-2. And the number of bad hires, maybe only two that I would say were a bad cultural fit. Um, how did that affect people? You could see it with the one hire. They were very, very good at being out there and being, let's just say, in front of the newest and greatest within the ads platforms and things like that. And I loved that, like, absolutely cherished that and loved that. But when it came to actually executing, there were just so many times where things just weren't done. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Oh, didn't get to that. And we have really great systems, and so this wasn't the case for the rest of the team that we run it, check everything through Asana. And so the team being frustrated, right? Because it's like, well, that's a reflection on them, and they feel like
Yeah.
again they're going back to, well, their income is potentially hurt by this then, because if they lose this client, that's less revenue that they're managing, so now their bonus is at risk. And so I think that once we got rid of that person, the morale was instantly boosted, and all loved this person, all wanted good for this person, but it just wasn't the right fit for both of us. The other one was just somebody who I would say had a habit of being negative, um, very good at their job, but very much just an attitude of negativity, and you could see it spread, and it felt like you see an apple that's maybe going bad, a poisoned apple, not a poisoned apple, but like an apple that's going bad,
Going
sitting in a
bad.
bushel of a bunch of other apples, and it's like that
It'll go
spreads,
bad.
right? And it felt like you could start to see that going through that. I felt like it was creeping into me as well, and it's like, okay, this isn't good. And when that person was no longer the team, you could see everybody's mood, their demeanor, like just start to shift. All of a sudden, it seemed like people were back in like the right mindset that they needed to be in to be able to execute well. And so, I would say I can't remember many other examples, but those were two that were very noticeable.
Yeah. I think it's a good one if you can't remember like the bad hires and stuff. Now, speaking, that's for bad hiring, but what about bad clients or difficult
Mm.
clients that maybe were giving you a hard time in the beginning, but you turned the tables like around and you actually made it for them? So how often does it work for you? Because so sometimes clients have unrealistic expectations and stuff.
Yeah. One of the things that we look at when we're taking on, I'd say overwhelmingly, there are two red flags for clients that are likely going to be tough. That doesn't mean we won't take them on, but you know that this is going to be a tough client and you're going to
Yeah.
have to really work through it. Red flag number one is they've gone through a lot of other agencies before getting to you. Um, Usually, what that means is that they haven't figured out something else about their business, probably. And so the
They are the
success has
problem.
nothing to do with any of the agencies that have come before or that are going to come after. That's not always the case, though. And I'll tell a story about that one here in just a minute.
Yeah.
The other red flag I would say is going to be um, if they haven't worked with an agency at all before. And so you're going to be their first one, and they just don't even know how this whole
What to
relationship is
expect?
supposed to work. Both of those are
Yeah.
really tough. Let's go back to the story on the one that went through a lot of other agencies before coming to us. I want to say that he said, geez, 9 out of 10 agencies clearly don't know what they're doing. You guys have figured it out. And he had a lot more explicit language than I like to use, but it was a really compliment to us, right? And what was going on with him was everybody was looking in the platform to figure out why his ads weren't working. We were the first ones to look outside of the platform to figure out why his ads weren't working. And so what had happened was there were some really bad YouTube reviews about his product that went live at a certain date. Let's say it was June of this year or whatever that year was. And you could see that that's when their ads started tanking. And so a lot of people, these YouTubes had like millions of views. And so you could say, okay, people are coming to the website. The ads are still driving people to the website. They click, they find around. They're like, okay, I'm going to go look and see what people are saying about this. They're going to YouTube. They're finding out that, I don't know. And so it was giving them pause. And so conversion rate was down, everything. It tried everything. All these other agencies tried everything. It was nothing wrong with necessarily the media buying tactics themselves. It was outside of the business. And so if you happen to be able to figure out why that is, what maybe could be a red flag of, man, they're burning through agencies, but they were just desperate, just saying, please, somebody figure out what's going on, and nobody could figure it out. So I'd say that's one that we turned it around. And then on the other side of that, clients who haven't worked with any agencies before, that could be tough too. I can't think of a specific example of how to tell it very well, but what we do to get around that is just making sure that it's over communicate. At this, I literally almost every day. And sometimes people are like, oh, you're going to set a bad precedent then if you communicate every day instead of once a week with them or whatever this might be. No, you're not. You have to gain the trust first. And the example that I would give is actually from my days back working in Open Heart. So way back before I had an agency, I worked in Open Heart. And this is maybe graphic for some people, so cover your ears if you don't like to hear about blood. But they've got these tubes that are in their chest after Open Heart that drain out the blood. And so you've literally just got tubes of blood coming out of their bodies of their loved ones. And you can imagine that within those, we try to get family back over to see them very quickly to see hey, they made it through surgery. They're alive. They've got a recovery tonight. There's a lot that can go wrong, but they're here kind of thing. And you want to get people back there. They're excited to see how, their loved one, obviously they're not awake yet. And so they would come back here, and I'd see that a lot of the nurses would say something along the lines of just get them in and out. Just yep, you saw him, get out of here kind of thing. I would try to take the time though to explain, hey, do you see this tube? This is a chest tube. And what it's doing is it's draining the extra blood outside of here. So that way the heart still has room to beat, because if that builds up too much blood there, then the heart it's getting squished and doesn't have enough room. So this is a good sign. I'm seeing the blood in here. It's doing its job correctly. It's not a bad thing to see this blood. Hey, do you see this over here? And I would explain things. I would take a little bit more times for that. And then when they would leave, I wouldn't hear from the family the rest of the night. They're like, no, you've got it. I trust you. You'll call me if there's something that I need to know. We're good. Versus sometimes, if you rushed them through, they're calling you every 5 minutes. Is my dad still doing okay? Hey, how's mom doing? Right? Because they're still worried about them and they haven't found that trust in you. So I like to over communicate early, gain the trust, help them to understand this. And then you can work through into hey, by the way, I want you to know, we've gone through a few extra things. We've spent a few extra time, maybe even tracking that time and saying under normal circumstances, this is what it should look like in our relationship. And then you can walk them through what that looks like. But you got to gain the trust first. Otherwise, you're just going to continually fight that.
Absolutely. As we spoke, even in bad situations and in good situations, communication is still key. And now being 12 years into the market, I'm sure that you have seen a lot, experienced a lot of ups and downs. I want to know what was your biggest, let's say, oh shit moment with your agency, whether that's a bad one or a good one.
Oh man. That's a good question. I would say, I don't know if this was an exact moment, but I can remember maybe it was 2018 or something. I'm still pretty new into running this. I'm still the only employee at the time, and it's me and some contractors. I'm taking sales calls and phone calls with clients while I'm, sitting in a Caribou or a Starbucks coffee shop, right? And I think we lost our biggest client, and they were very happy with us. They had just been acquired or something like that by another another PE group, and that PE group had their own agency that was going to run things, and they were going to save money for that. And so it's like, nothing we could do wrong. But it was the first moment that I can really remember thinking, this sucks. I understand losing customers when you didn't do a good job. Get it. It's like, yep, we can figure that out. But
Yeah,
losing a customer when you're like,
you're
we
doing a
did a
good
great job,
job.
you were acquired, like, what? I had never even in my mind thought that this was a thing that could happen. It was just, and so I remember that being like a big crap. What do we do now? And how do we reframe this? And how do I fix this? And I remember being pretty upset about it. Like, it's hard not to take it personally, even though you knew it wasn't personal. It's hard to not feel like this personal, like, I suck kind of thing, right? And so I think the way that we started working through that, though, if I can remember correctly, was just more, again, talking to mentors at that time. Dave Mortensen was really good talking to me about all of that. But I can remember at that time too, I think one of the hardest parts about that was, with that client gone, I was still so new to running the agency at the time that I knew that as of that month, I wasn't making enough money to pay the bills. So it was like, well, how long does that last, right? Um, and so I can remember that being a really frustrating thing. And so I'd say for me, a lot of this was talking to mentors and a lot of prayer. And so one of the things that I felt really comforted me was this image of God being existing in multiple dimensions of time. And so we think of time to us as very linear. It's like this happened and then this happened. And so if you can imagine like this timeline, like you're walking along and you've got this obstacle, and it's like, okay, here, my microphone's the obstacle, right? I have no clue what's on the other side of this obstacle because I'm stuck on this side of time. But God, in His omniscience, like can move over to the other side. He sees what's on the other side of this obstacle for you. And so realizing that helped me to realize that it's very possible in this situation that you're going through, that whatever's on the other side of that is better for you, and that you actually had to get rid of this client. You maybe had to fire that client, or that client firing you, as hard as that might be, it's in order to open up this space for something better to take its place. And that's
It happens
okay.
for a reason.
Yeah, even if, and this hasn't happened, but I put this in my mind, even if that thing truly ended up being cataclysmic, right? Because that's what happens as an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
You're like, well, if I lose this client, then I lose this, and if I lose this, and I don't have enough money to pay this. And so it's like you spiral so fast. You're
yeah,
like, the
yeah,
whole business is going to implode. And it doesn't. It never has. But even if it did, maybe that's also still for the best. And that there was some reason why that needed to implode in order to open up something completely different. And you hear about this from other people who've experienced these examples where business failed, another business failed, another business failed, fourth business, wild success. And so even still recognizing that even if your worst nightmare comes true and the business implodes and you foreclose on the home, and that can still be one of those things that's a stepping stone into something else.
I don't have experience like worst case scenario. Now, one thing I want to get to is you obviously were in the market during the pandemic years. So I want to know how that has affected you and the team. Was there like a drastic change? How did you overcome the whole situation? Because it was difficult for everyone.
Yeah. So let's say there's a couple of aspects of that. One is the aspect of how the team works and functions, and I'll cover that piece first. The other aspect is going to be the needs for your services, right? And so some
Yeah.
people were negatively impacted by that. We weren't really. At first, we had no clue what was going on, and I will say, like, here's one of those other moments that you're like, "Ooh, what's going on?" I had just brought on our first employee, which technically wasn't an employee at the time, my business partner. So I just significantly increased the cost of operating the business. March, I think it was like March 8th of 2020, right before everything shut down. And then it shuts down, and you're like, crap, did I just make a really, really, really bad timing decision kind of thing? The benefit to us is that because the unfortunate reality of business being shut down locally, a lot of things flocked online. So as a result, our business did well during that period of time because most of our clients are e-commerce merchants, and so they're selling, and
Selling
so
online.
they're increasing, and so it was a very beneficial thing. We had some clients that it was not good for because of whatever reason, that the type of stuff that they were selling or whatever, right? But so that was a good thing. But I lost where I was going with the second part of this, well, or the first part that I said. Um, about how the company works together, right? How you actually work as employees. We built the company remote from the very beginning, and so it didn't impact the way that we worked at all. Um, it's a really good book by Jason Fried called Remote, and I had read this back in, I want to say it was like 2013, 2014, um, when I was still in SaaS, and it was one of those things that really impacted me to say, I like the way that this works. I think this is a very good approach. And as a marketing agency, there's really not a good reason for us to have to be all together in one office, with the exception of the creative team. I would say, like, this is where it's like being around brainstorming, like that just, I don't think that you can get the same energy out of being remote. But for the majority of what we do, which is the ad management platform stuff, um, we were able to be completely remote and be able to, operate completely the same way. And so there was no difference for the way that we worked. And so it didn't really significantly impact us.
That's good. That's good because a lot of businesses were like
Yeah,
drastically affected. And
massive.
now you being in the e-commerce industry, which is a very fast evolving industry, like trends going in and out like all the time, and offering fast evolving services, for example, as that change from time to time with the iOS updates and stuff and everything. So I want to know what is your go-to resources to get updated with the industry trends.
um, Man, this is it's a good question because I should have a better a better source for this. But I have found that the majority of stuff that I see um, out there, especially at like a lot of the speaking, like the conferences, and I don't know if you knew this. I'm just now discovering this. Most of the big conferences you can think of, in order to be one of the speakers there, you either have to be, let's just say, an operator, like an e-commerce merchant yourself, and that's fine. One of the benefits to this is you're giving real personal experience, but it's a very limited experience, right? You're saying this worked for
Yeah,
me in my very, very specific niche, but I have no clue if it will work for you and yours. So that's still good. There's a lot of value in that. Um, or if you're like a vendor or something like that, it's like there's a fee to be able to, like, you have to, like, you can speak, but you have to sponsor, and the
you have to pay.
sponsorship is significant. I think the lowest I've been quoted is maybe 60,000. I just got a quote from somebody
Wow.
else for 100,000 to be able to be a speaker, right? Um, what I found is that a lot of those conferences, a lot of those speakers, it's outdated information. It's stuff that could have worked very well 2 or 3 years ago, but it's not happening right now. So the place that I would say that I've found the most really up to date right now stuff, excuse me, is going to be on X. And it's wild. A lot of the best operators in the e-commerce space are there. A lot of the best thought leaders for services there are there, and there's just a lot of really good information sharing that takes place there. The caveat to that is you don't know what's good or what's not good, and so you have to weed through a lot of stuff. The benefit, though, is that you're getting very up to date stuff of what people are testing today. If there is an algorithmic change, they're talking about it right now. They're not
Yeah.
waiting, 3 months to be able to write this article about XYZ or whatever. It's like you're seeing the very real. So if you can read it without it making you overreactive, where you're like, great, we're going to do this and this and this and this and this, because that's not good. If you can read it and say, great, we're going to put a test together. And let's say that you've got, 50 clients, and you look at this and you say, okay, we're going to test this out on one client because this is an interesting thing. Let's run this as a test to see if this makes sense for our other clients, things like that. Then I think that works very well. The other place I would say is going to really good authoritative podcasts, and there are a number that I could recommend. Mine being one of them, Up Arrow Podcast. Another one that I really like is the Operators Podcast. Like, these are guys, they're 9-figure operators of e-commerce stores talking about exactly what's working in theirs. And they'll argue about it from time to time because there's different things that are working for them in theirs. Another one that I really like is going to be Kurt Elster's podcast, the Unofficial Shopify Podcast. But there's a number of really good podcasts that I'd say are having very thoughtful guests on their show talking about very real things that are working right now. And I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And now, given your experience and expertise now, like almost 12 years later, I want to know what would be maybe a few things, 3 to 5 things that you would tell William 12 years ago, just before starting the agency.
Yeah, 3 to 5 things. I might have to think about that, but let me start with one. The number one thing that I probably wasn't willing to listen to at first is focus. When I started the agency, even I think we were, I believe we had reached over $1 million a year, and I still hadn't actually taken it full time myself.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I can remember meeting with my mentor again, Dave Mortensen, and him just saying like, I'm just trying to figure out. It's like I just want to figure out what I want to do with my life when I grow up, kind of thing, right? And I can remember him basically saying is like, you have a business generating $1 million a year. What if you actually just focused on that? Like, what if you
Full
actually
time.
put your heart and soul and mind into this? And it was like, I hadn't thought about that, right? Like, it just felt like it was like, because it happened by accident, that it wasn't ever my intention or vision or anything like that at first.
Yeah.
Once he put that bug in my ear, though, I really started to focus, and that's when we started to scale, and that's when we started, winning awards and like winning some really fun, awesome new clients, because it became intentional focus. And I would say that's going to be true for, I believe, success in any area of life is there has to be the intent, and then there has to be a focus on that.
Focus.
Yeah. Outside of those two things, or one, really, if you wrap that up as one thing, I would say figure out the processes sooner than you think, right? I probably would have implemented EOS sooner. I think I waited a little too long on that. No, it wasn't too long, but I think that we could have avoided some of the earlier things. I know somebody who started EOS on their business with one employee, and they went ahead and did that. I don't know how well that works. This is Matt Meents, and he's a serial entrepreneur, very, very good, very successful. And I really appreciated that approach to where he's like, we're running it strict EOS from the get-go. I don't know if that's for everybody, especially if you don't have previous experience with it. If you've already got previous experience, it maybe makes sense. And the other thing I would say is going to be find a mentor or mentors, like a group to be a part of. EO is one that I still haven't joined, but I have a lot of friends that are there, and they talk very highly about it. That said, I've always had a really good friend group right now where I can think of half a dozen or more people that are entrepreneurs that I meet with on a regular basis. We're just not officially in like an EO group. We're talking about like all of the different things that we're coming up against, problems. How do we solve that? Even though they're completely different types of businesses, there's a lot of the same core issues that you're running into, whether it's a profit problem or a people problem or whatever, right? A process problem. But it's like there's just something to be able to say, hey, they understand me. And that's a very good thing, because it can feel very lonely very quickly as a CEO, as an owner of a business. And so I'd say focus. If you're going to make me boil it down to 3, focus with intent. Find a good mentor. And I already forgot my other one that I said. What was the third one that I said?
Try implement things faster.
Yeah, process sooner than later. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even in general, trying things, even if you don't know that they will work, even if you will fail, you will just fail faster, and that will speed up the process to succeeding.
Totally.
Yeah, so now I want to know your perspective on that whole AI stuff. How do you think AI will and is affecting e-commerce agencies like yourself, and how is it if impacting now, or will impact the industry you're working with, the e-commerce businesses?
It's wild. I absolutely love so much about what AI is doing, because it's just, I mean, it feels like science fiction still a little bit. It's like we talked about this for years, and then to see it really unfolding, and every day just wild new things coming out. That it's just the acceleration that you're seeing with the different AI tools right now is impressive too. If you're somebody who's not impressed with AI right now, I want you to know that you're just trying the wrong tools probably,
Yeah.
Or if you are trying the right ones, you're not trying the paid versions of them, or you're just there's some prompt engineering work that you need to do to really get better at them. There's a lot of junk out there that's AI that it's like, this is novel and it's just not that exciting yet. But the paid versions of things are very impressive. ChatGPT being one of them, and Google's AI Studio being another one, like Veo 2 that I don't think it's officially out yet, but I've just seen the videos. It's like, it's wild what it's doing.
Yeah.
How is that going to impact things? There's a lot of different ways. One, in the e-commerce space in general, it's impacting search significantly. And so being able to start understanding how these search tools are being used and then making sure that you're optimizing for that is going to be key. And I can't get into probably a whole lot of the details here. That's not my area of specialty. And so I'd say that there are better people that are at the forefront of that. But the key is make sure that you understand how it works, test it out yourself, and make sure that you are, doing something to stay in the front of this. The other key is going to be using it to automate a lot of different pieces of your business and understanding what should or shouldn't be used through AI. And so let's say an example would be, there's a lot of great tools that you can use to create new ads using AI. Wonderful. Use it. But it can't replace a lot of other pieces of this as well, too. And so I would say that there's going to be a lot of that, a lot of analytics work. It's replacing a lot of that. It's very good to be able to look at you can upload entire spreadsheets and entire databases, and really start analyzing stuff. Where it fails, though, is unless you give it the direction that it needs, it won't understand it. So there's a lot of context that's lost if it doesn't have the right data. And an example of this would be Facebook, for instance. Facebook's algorithm is, let's just go ahead and say, it's a type of AI to a point. It's machine learning. It's very, very intelligent system. But if it doesn't have your profit data, it can't optimize towards your profit. And so it can optimize towards your top line. It can optimize towards goals you set. But if you haven't set the right goal for it, and or you haven't given it the right data, it cannot do what you actually want. And this is one of the ways that we try to get around this, is we give it the right data and we give it the right goals. So that way it can do a better job for you. So this is going to be true for any of the AI tools. How is it impacting agency world? So far, I would say the biggest thing is you're going to see pressure for more to be done with less people. A lot of people would say, well, is it going to completely disrupt agencies? I don't believe so. My reasoning for that is I think that a lot of people are still going to want to have, at least for right now, a lot of people are still going to want to have human connection. That's a big piece of this. And so it's harder to blame an AI if something doesn't go wrong, because who's actually to blame then in that situation? If you do something, it's you. Like we feel that blame. It's like, hey, if I had the AI do it and my business fails, then I can't really say, hey, ChatGPT, you ruined my business.
Yeah.
Then I have to say, it's like, crap, I screwed up. I made the wrong choice. If there's another person on the line, we do feel like we can hold a finger towards somebody and say, like, you need to figure this out. And so I think that there's still like this human connection that needs to be there, where they say, great, the AI is doing it. What do you think, though? Is it doing the right things? Is it still optimizing towards the right goals? We've seen, let's just say, algorithms get out of hand into a negative feedback loop. This happens to human beings. It happens to machines. And so there still needs to be like this check and balance of machine versus human, of saying, like, who's in the negative feedback loop and how do we get it back out of that and make sure that's focused on the right things. So I think that the pressure is going to be, instead of one person managing 5 to 7 accounts, it's going to be one person managing, 10 to 40 accounts, or whatever that number might be. There's going to be pressure for more of it to be automated, and that person, though, still being this guardrail, if you would, between the two.
I 100% agree. I still feel like you need that one final human touch and still that one emotional touch. So yeah, it's been a really, really great one. I think that's a wrap from my side. It's almost like the 1 hour mark, which from my side went too quick. So I just want to know, like, from your side, is there anything that you might feel that we have not dived deep into, or anything that you would like to mention that maybe I'm not?
That's a good question. We covered a lot, so that's
Yeah.
good. I would say if there's anything else that I would want to cover, because I think it's important, it is figure out if we're talking to entrepreneurs here,
Yeah.
figure out how to make sure you set aside the right balance, structure, time, whatever you want to call it, for your personal life as well. And so, very quickly, it can get imbalanced as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
We say the phrase work-life balance, and as an entrepreneur, it feels like complete garbage because there is no balance to a point. You are going to work a lot. That is just
Yeah.
part of being an entrepreneur for the most part. And I can't think of anybody that I know that's actually been successful working very few hours. And so you're going to work a lot. The the way that you need to look at this though is, but what are the other buckets that you need to make sure that you're filling up, because before you know it you can miss out on all of it. And so this is an EOS concept too, right? It's like putting the rocks in and things like that, but what are the other buckets? And so part of that is going to be like, you should have time like for dates for your wife, you should have time for your kids, you should have time for friends, you should have time for being creative, you should have time for working out and being healthy, you should have time for me, spirituality and faith. Whatever those buckets are that are important things for you, that you say 10 years from now, who do I want to make sure that I am as a human being? And then at least carve out to make sure that you're filling those buckets a little bit, whatever that might be. And so for me, it's a really good morning routine where I'm going to wake up, I'm going to do my workout, I'm going to read my Bible, right? Like those are things that it's like, those are non-negotiables for me. And whatever fires for the most part are happening within the business or wherever, it's like I start my day off with these things that are very important to me. Make sure you have a time where you can be able to do the same for yourself.
That's a really, really great one. Great one. Yeah, so William, I really, really want to thank you for taking the time to join with me today. It was a really, really fun conversation and insightful one. I'm really sure the audience will have a lot of things to get from this podcast. Huge values dropped. So once again, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone joining us today. And until the next episode, keep growing, keep thriving, and we'll see you on the next one.